per year. And that includes a lot of the VSP requests are fairly quick, turning them right out the door. I don't work on those, but Heidi, who works on those, she just does a very, very high volume of those. And the thing with those is they come in through the Vermont State Police portal. There's a statutory fee schedule for a police report, video and audio. Police report costs $20. So you're not getting a police report unless you go onto the website, pay $20, and that's how you receive your police report. And unless it falls into one of the more complex categories, you're getting that in the next day or so. And then when it comes to the more complex requests, we get about, like in 2022, we had 250 of those. 2024, we had 165. I think that was more of like a division of labor that we changed, that it went down. I don't think we received less in that category. We just sort of divvied them up differently.
Perhaps give me an example of what a complex would be compared to some of the others. VSP records are oftentimes very simple. Crash report, police record, these are things that are existing. We just turn them around.
Right.
But a complex one.
On the other hand, yeah, this isn't even one of the most complex ones, but this is just what we need to do is, like, if we, for example, got a request for a recent DUI investigation, first we have to search for and compile the records. We have to make sure this is our case. Sometimes we get a request for a case that VSP didn't investigate. It was the local PD. And in that case, we refer them to request it from the local PD. But let's say it's ours. And we find our database, look it up, get a copy of all the records we have from that. There usually is photos, videos, like body cam video, and a report. Then we have to determine whether or not the investigation is open or closed, whether or not our officers at VSP are still investigating it, or whether they consider it to be closed and have moved on to sending it to the state's attorney's office for them to review and make a determination of whether they're going to file charges. If it's closed, in our opinion, and they've sent it off for review, we then have to check with the SA to see if they've filed the charges yet. That's relevant in our determination of whether or not it's going to be released or denied. We have to see if the case has been arraigned yet. That's relevant in determining whether or not the suspect's name can be released. If it's been arraigned, it can. If he hasn't been arraigned, it cannot. Status of the criminal charges, have they, whether additional investigation is going to be needed. Sometimes the SA requests that the officers do more follow-up. And then we have to confer with the state's attorney to see if they think our release of the records or some of the records would interfere with their prosecution, which is a very thorny issue to work out, and involves working with someone outside of our organization, someone who it's not really their job to answer my questions. So they don't always get back to me right away. So it's pretty time consuming. And there's almost always, with that type of request, there's pretty much always body camera footage, which is painstakingly, you have to have training to use the equipment. You have to have the equipment. You have to spend a lot of time redacting the video. It's very difficult to do, and always 100% of the time requires redaction because witnesses, victims, names, faces, anything cannot be released. So it's very difficult to, the idea that is statutorily required to be turned around immediately or within 3 days is just, it's not possible, because we need to take into account the integrity of the investigation, of the prosecution, and privacy rights of everybody involved.
There are a great many needles to thread, is I think another way to say it.
Yeah.
We certainly want to respect the state and democratic society and all that. But at the same time, we also want to protect privacy of victims, privacy of those who in an adjudicated case. All of those elements have to be considered here, and none of them are simple as we process through these.
So maybe this question is too granular for now, but I'm going to take a shot at it anyway. So you said 250-ish larger complex requests last year, right? And with that, ballpark out of the 250, how many times do you have to engage with another aspect of government, whether it be local law enforcement, like you said, states attorneys and sheriffs, things of that nature? Is it?
You have to engage with outside. Maybe 50 maybe 50%.
Okay. No, that's great. I was just looking for an ish there, just to get a sense from you.
And just understand that no two of those are the same
Right.
as well. And there are some of those, for example, if you ask us for an email chain, especially around like a purchase or something like that, there may be 40 different contractors that we've negotiated with, many different consultants that we've played with. Some of them exist still, some of them don't. You know, there's lots of complexity in these moments where we've got to respect their proprietary information, respect security, you know, any number of considerations that have to go through this that makes these very complicated.
Right. And sometimes it's not just a town or an SA that's fairly easy to get a hold of. Sometimes there's a federal investigation ongoing, or there is an investigation in a different state. Those are more difficult to track down.
Any other questions from the committee while I got a pause button hit here? No. Yes, was that yes?
Yes. When you, so if you have like photos or videos and you said you need to redact and who does that work? Is there a person who works in your department whose job it is to just go through all of those things and?
Yes, yeah, I do.
You do it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right.
I do all that. So there's me and then one other, his name is Sam Weaver, and he just kind of has a parallel position to me. And we do all of the above, you know, we take in the request and we redact it and we do all the legwork of communicating and we send it out the door.
And just to
Run
be
it by
clear,
like Dan along the way.
that's true as well. But that's a course in video editing, right? I mean, that this is no small skill. It's no small amount of training and software and requirements. We are very fortunate. Like I said before, we are rich in resources to have these folks who have not only done this before, but we have the opportunity to train them and have people in legacy that can bring them forth. I can only imagine any number of other situations where people don't simply have those resources to be able to do that kind of work that we are fortunate to have.
That's a lot.
It's substantial. And that's and correct me if I'm wrong here, but that is absolutely a painstaking, long process of, you know, being careful about faces and, you know, that's not simple, right? I mean, especially in sensitive homicides and in investigations where we're really trying to focus on victims' rights and that element. It's a very, you have to be very cautious in that process and very painstaking to go through that process in a very sophisticated way.
I agree.
Any other hands? No. Back to you.
Yeah, I think if you're trying to, that was me running through, like a common law enforcement related record. Another request that is more complex is requests for emails. And those are very different. And I think this is more like other agencies around the state deal with this. And there's just so much that is documented in emails these days. I mean, if you're working on something, there's usually a large volume of emails about any given topic. And again, it touches on like it may seem, some people I think may think it's, you know, like the emails are right there. Why don't you just turn them right over? But things like people's cell phone numbers and direct lines are not public information. So some people have that in their email signature. And so every single email from this person has a cell phone number that needs to be taken out. And there's technology that we use to help us grab repetitive information that's found throughout a record, but it's not foolproof, and you gotta check through with a fine-tooth comb to make sure you didn't miss anything, because it only takes one time for your cell phone number to be out there, and then it's out there. And we treat every request as if it's going to be put on social media, is what I say. So it doesn't matter if you are requesting something that's like, let's say it's a police report that you were personally involved in. Unfortunately, we have to redact that the same way we would as if it were going to a reporter from 7 days.
And this isn't just about social media, by the way, and I know you all know this, but I'll say it anyway. We learned some very important lessons with the assassination attempts in the Midwest earlier last year about the availability of private information in the ethernet, right, out there. And that's something we take very seriously. We take very seriously that these emails contain information about our public safety infrastructure. For example, I was just here with you folks last week talking about the Public Safety Communication Task Force. That has been a request for emails over and over and over again, and that's fine. We're happy to share. But when we start talking about discussions around the land mobile network and the location of towers and the readiness of infrastructure, that can't be in the public conscious. I mean, we want to share the information that's relevant, but we can't just be publishing where our radio locations are and the weaknesses of our radio locations. That's welcoming a disaster among many other problems that occurs. So that's the needle we thread. And as Tracy points out, when somebody comes and says, give us all the emails associated with the Public Safety Communication Task Force, that not only makes Tracy have to go back and say, we just can't do that. There's literally hundreds of thousands of people involved in this. So then we have to narrow the focus, and we get the focus narrowed. Then even then, one chain of emails might involve 6 different contractors, 6 different stakeholder groups, all of the people in those stakeholder groups. And that is just a rabbit hole that takes hundreds of hours to untangle.
And there's nothing in the PRA that I'm just relying on requesters being cooperative with me. They don't need to narrow their request. If they want all emails from the deputy commissioner from the past 5 years, I can say this is really, I can't, this is going to take forever. I would like you to narrow your request. They can say, no, I want them all. And that's that.
And to be clear, I'm not being hyperbolic here. When we really had requests that says, I need all of the emails forever on this particular topic. How do you even navigate that?
Yeah.
That's the challenge that we're faced in a lot of cases.
Yeah, no. And that's understood, right? Like that's the sort of the voluminous requests that are not focused to a fixed curiosity or concern. I'm going to just throw the AI question out in the conversation. Have you seen aspects of AI integrated into your requests? Because I've been hearing that out of municipalities now.
So I don't know if this answers your question, but we've explored AI as a tool to help do redaction and speed up our process time.
I was thinking more of the requests coming in. I've been
not that I know of.
Okay.
I know of. Yeah, not that I know of. Mostly we get, so there's two ways you can go. You can make a public records request. One, you can make it on the portal that I mentioned. VSP is a portal. You go in, you fill out the information, you pay, you get your records that way. But the ones that I process mostly are emails from people. So they seem legit.
Yeah. Well, and even if you folks started using AI as a resource to do sort of just the sweeping first run on a redaction per se, right? You still have yourselves going over the finalized work before
Right.
you're issuing it anyway. Yeah. Sorry to stop you there with that question. But do you have anything further to offer right now?
One last point I'll make is just when we're talking about the email requests and how voluminous they can be, those no one is paying anything for them. And then a person who's requesting a police report is paying $20. So there's 2 ways that you can charge. One of them is the statutory fees for police records, which is very clear. And then the other is the Secretary of State fee schedule, which is just more difficult to assess. And it's quite frankly not something we use very often because it's a minute by minute assessment that needs to be made. And it's pretty difficult to make that assessment within a reasonable time frame up front and accurately predict how many minutes it's going to take for certain types of, there's different staff levels that are different fees. And so our goal is to get the records out to the people who are in need, to the people who want them as fast as possible. And we find that the fee schedule usually slows it down And we just haven't found a way to like effectively use that. And so we do end up, it's a little bit of an unfair fee structure where people are paying $20 for a really simple thing that is really quick and then paying nothing for other requests that take.
Oh, yeah, that is an interesting tweak to the matrix.
I've been deputy commissioner since 2022. I don't think I've ever seen us charge, other than the fee scheduled ones, the police reports. I don't think we've ever used it in my time with the committee, with the PRA committee. I think that's, again, to be very clear, in no way is the Department of Public Safety pushing back against public records requests. We certainly want to do that. And I think we do an extraordinary amount of effort to match the requests that come in. It's just in those cases, it's almost impossible. It's so much work to create that fee process that it's easier just to do the work and give it out. And that's kind of where
To say simply like eat the cost, because trying to calculate it is.
And then they'll come in and say, we just want to review the records, which means we have to have staff hours while they review the records. And again, it's just, at least in my history with this, it's simpler just to push the records out and do the work than it is to try to charge for them.
In and around that, yeah, I mean, it seems like early in the testimony, you identified roughly 6 full-time staff-ish between.
Well, so 2 that are entirely full-time,
Staff
dedicated just to this.
Yeah.
2 that are at least part-time, but I would suggest that at least 3/4 of their time of that part-time, of their overall job is dedicated to public records. And then 2 staff attorneys, in addition to those folks, who dedicate a substantial amount of time to this, among many other things that they do.
Understood. Rep. Waters Evans.
I'm just thinking about this. I don't know if there are any answers to these questions. I'm wondering if there's like, just thinking about what you were just saying, is it possible that this is just reality now, that sort of these advancements in like, I think email is probably a huge chunk of it, right? And so is this just the way that we live now, and do we need to adjust accordingly? And like, would just having more staff people, I'm not saying I want to do that, I'm just saying like, would having another person who does this full time, would that be just accepting the reality and moving forward? Like, we're just struggling a little bit with, like you said, you don't want to limit people's access to public information. It's
Yeah.
really important that they have that. I'm concerned about the cost, meaning that there's a barrier being created that like only people who can pay for it can get the information. I don't know.
We're concerned about that too.
Yeah,
I think, Representative, there's a philosophical musing there that I'm not sure that I'm prepared to fully answer.
right, which is why I said you probably can't answer.
I don't know. However,
Yeah.
I think it's a very reasonable question to ask, and I can say this about that. It's certainly our reality. Like we have in the last, again, I've been with the Department of Public Safety for 4 years. In that timeframe, we have fully embraced that this is the new reality of what we do. We've dedicated more people than we've ever had before, more hours than we've ever had before, and that is just sort of the 24-hour news cycle, request for information all the time. I think that is in part of the reality. If you want to know whether it should be the reality, that's a different question, and I'm not sure I'm ready to answer that.
Rep. Pisnall.
Do you find that there are repeat requests from the same people over and over again about different agencies, or just like they have nothing better to do to ask for a public record request on, different
Do you
agencies?
see that? Yes.
So I'm also wondering if,
We should be clear. I don't want to say what their motives are. I
Right.
don't know what their motives
I don't know
are.
what their motives are.
We definitely have familiar names. I'm sure if which I uttered here would be of no surprise to any of you.
Mhm.
There are definitely ones that occupy an inordinate amount of time of our team.
So that being said, and then within the time consuming,
Of that,
maybe there shouldn't be a fee.
of some sort for those. you're allowed, I'm just throwing this out there, 5 public requests per calendar year. When those 5 are up, then you gotta pay, or, you know, I'm just saying, I mean, we all want access to public records, but again, you don't want the burden of all of the work that they're taking time off somebody else that might have a really good legitimate request. I don't know, just for those people that just love to chase the ambulance and rescue squad and, you know, whatever. Just throwing it out.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
It might make more sense to have some sort of a threshold, like if a request comes in and a agency assesses it will take over a certain number of hours, then there might be some nominal fee or something, but because it's more about someone can make 5 requests and or 15 requests, and each of them take 10, are very easy and don't take a lot of time and resources to process. So it's less about the number of requests and more about the nature of the request and how much is sought, like the volume of records that is sought.
Okay, so let's say that I wanted all of your emails. And I made a public records request. And then 3 days later, Chair Byron also wanted all of your emails and made a public records request. Do you have a system where you can start, you've already done the work for my request, and then you just do the extra work for the 3 days after my request that Chair Byron wanted? Or are you obligated to start over every single time?
No, I mean, I think, no, more like, this is my analogy for that. If someone requests all the records from police number 123, when that's done, as long as it's as long as it's pretty contemporaneous, it's not like 5 years have passed and some of the circumstances have changed. If we just redacted and prepared those records for public release with any kind of recent, we can just release the same, don't start over.
Oh, okay.
Say we archive everything and we're able to reproduce that. Like if there's one investigation that a lot of people are interested in, we do that work once and we're done with it. Unless something changes with the case stat. Unless something changes with the investigation or like circumstances change in a way that would make us have to do the redactions differently. But that's usually not the case if it's pretty recent.
And sometimes that's very easy. We do have a lot of similar processes and we do try to work smarter in that regard. Sometimes it's not, though. As you mentioned, sometimes it's not contemporaneous. Sometimes it's just a little bit different than the last one. So there is a lot of starting and stopping and restarting again.
Right. Let's say it's a DUI and we released the records while the case was pending. Now it's resolved. There's a conviction, but count 2 has been expunged. That is starting from the ground up.
Any further hands? Representative Hooper of Burlington.
You maintain a file or the equivalent of a file of all requests that you 5-year period, so you have the ability to extract.
Yes.
someone.
And then also, we're also very fortunate that we have people who've been doing this for a while. So there's a relative surplus of historical knowledge who can say, that's one of the challenges we have. For instance, one of our staff attorneys just retired last year. And with her went years of institutional knowledge who could look at this and say, oh, well, that's just like the case we had 2 years ago, that as we replace her, we're not going to have that. And I can certainly imagine many communities that don't have that capability.
Anything else from the table? Okay. Thank you so much for your time.
Anytime.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. We are gonna now shift testimony over to the league, and I believe they have Renee Marshall. Please, yeah, however you want to do this. Mr. Hanford, good to see you.
Yes, so for the record, Josh Hanford, Director of Intergovernmental Relations at the Vermont League of Cities and Towns. I have brought Renee Marshall from the town of Colchester here to talk to you, but just to kick things off, thanks for having us back. Thanks for your continued interest in the Public Records Act reform. Just want to also emphasize that everything you heard from public safety and Vermont State Police also happens at municipalities that have local police departments. And clearly, maybe there's a different set of resources and ability to respond at those levels, but all of the things described that the Department of Public Safety sees happens at municipal police departments. So those concerns are also our concerns. Also, on the AI front, whether it's using AI to manage incoming records or receiving AI requests, I think there should be concerns on both sides of those. Both sides of that process of using AI to help you manage your public records as well as receiving public records. So Renee Marshall she can introduce herself, but she is the Deputy Town Manager in Colchester and also is the officer designated by Colchester in charge of public records. They're fortunate enough to have a large enough community to have a position like that and someone that manages public records. I think she'll tell you often she spends more than half of her time not in the service of what a typical town manager does, but in managing public records, and have brought to light some additional considerations that we believe you should consider in the public records reform related to what you heard about for the first hour of your morning, fraud and potential losses of taxpayer dollars that come in the form of public records requests. I know she's got a specific example to tell you about and a proposal to try to correct some of that. But I know as an organization, Vermont League of Cities and Towns, we are inundated with fraud attempts. I can't even check voicemails that come through our voice over IPA because 99% of them aren't real. And they're an attachment if I opened would encrypt our system.
There you go.
And cause great harm. And
It is a nightclub.
and you often receive public records requests from individuals you don't know. Maybe they're across the world because we have no residency requirements, and their record may be on the attachment that you may be clicking on or asked to click on, or ignore it and be in violation of not responding to that record. So I want to turn it over to Renee unless you have any questions for me. Excellent.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and representatives on this committee.
Welcome.
Sharing the screen.
Oh, please. Yeah, yep. Thank you, Dan.
Again, thank you very much for having me here today. I'm going to be sharing our support for the proposals the BLCT had shared with you last week, as well as adding a couple additional ones to that list.
Would you just state your name and title for the record, please?
Renee Marshall, Deputy Town Manager for the town of Colchester. So transparency is an essential element of open and democratic government. In Vermont, is it not true?
Take your time. We got plenty of clock.
All right. Okay, so in Vermont, the primary means of providing transparency are the state's open meeting law and the public records law. These laws implement the command of Chapter 1, Article 6 of the Vermont Constitution, that officers of government are trustees in service of the people and are at all times in a legal way accountable to them. So the full text of Article 6, that all power being originally inherent in and consequently derived from the people, therefore all officers of government, whether legislative or executive, are their trustees and servants, and at all times in a legal way accountable to them. Vermont's constitutional accountability language has changed very little since it was first adopted in 1777 as Article 5. In 1786, it was renumbered as Article 6, and a qualifier in a legal way was added. So again, if this presentation is going to articulate Town of Colchester's support of the LCT's proposed legislative actions that were discussed by Samantha last week. And additionally, I will suggest two other ones. So first, extend the number of days to respond to allow up to 14 business days from receipt of request. With the increasing volume of public records requests, additional time would allow municipalities more time to fully evaluate those requests. And to be clear, most municipalities do not have dedicated staff resources for this. Many are sharing the role with many other tasks as well. The penalty and consequence to municipalities for disclosing personally identifiable information, medical information, or other information that is otherwise legally exempt would be significantly worse and far more costly than the failure to respond to these public records requests. To prescribe a clear act of denial for which the requester may appeal. In Colchester, requests are being sent to a variety of departments and often not to the appropriate staff person that would be responsible for such a request. Also, technology malfunctions, a missed email, or email sent to spam may result in missing that 3-day window. Premature escalation of appeals can result in unnecessary costs and liabilities for municipalities. And to clarify the process of appeal at the municipal level. While in Colchester this is not an issue, this clarification would benefit many municipalities where there's uncertainty on who the head of agency is. So it's often the select board, unless there's a town administrator or a town manager, or unless the select board designates another individual. Allow the municipalities to recover the true cost of producing records and for the cost for redaction, regardless of whether the requester chooses to view or receive copies of the records. So as articulated earlier, for some requests, there is a significant amount of time of staff time that's required for locating those records and then evaluating if there's anything that contains the personally identifiable information or medical information or anything else that would be otherwise exempt. And the cost of the staff time is not currently recoverable if the requester elects to just come in and view those files without taking copies with them. And finally, support of the VLCTs create relief from vexation requests. So we've had related situations where we've received multiple and ongoing requests by the same requester that resulted in monopolizing approximately half of the position for the deputy town manager's time in reviewing these requests and then producing the appropriate materials that were responsive to those requests, but also follow the applicable state and federal laws. And again, in Colchester, the position of deputy town manager is the custodian of public records or the public records officer. And so for the two additional proposals, one being consider applying the Public Records Act only for requests from residents and businesses within the state of Vermont. And I'll explain that a little bit. We're seeing the largest volume of our requests now are coming from places outside of Vermont. And so those, the residents and businesses within the state of Vermont are paying our taxes. And it is their duty and right to check up on governments. I believe the intent of the Vermont Public Records Act was to make state and local government more transparent and accountable to their citizens, but it was not purposefully developed to provide easy access to public records for the financial or time-saving benefit of businesses outside of Vermont. We are receiving, again, a large volume of those requests from businesses outside of Vermont that use the public records request as sort of an easy button, and others who turn around and sell that information to businesses or individuals that may or may not use it for legal purposes. And the final proposal. Consider language in the Public Records Act that only requires information about financial transactions to be produced electronically, mailed, or allowed to be photographed 6 months after that transaction have been completed. So the contracts related to the records are completed and paid. Explain a little bit about that. The town of Colchester had an attempted fraud for an amount above $1 million. This was made possible by online public records related to purchases. Fortunately, in our case, we was caught by a diligent employee before anything occurred. While this attempt didn't result in a financial loss to the town of Colchester, other Vermont municipalities have not been so fortunate. I would consider only requiring information about financial transactions to be produced electronically, mailed, or allowed to be photographed, again, 6 months after that transaction has been fully completed. This would include, but not be limited to, purchase orders, warrants for payments, checks, and other such information. This change could limit the risks to Vermont municipalities and ultimately the citizens they serve that are required to pay taxes for those services. This would continue to allow access for that in-person inspection of these records. So we're not preventing access, especially for the folks that are impacted by the services, but we're trying to limit the liability. So in closing, I'll just, again, list off the proposals by VLCT that we support, as well as the 2 additional. So extend the number of days to respond to allow up to 14 days from receipt of the request. Prescribe a clear act of denial for which the requester may appeal. Clarify the process of appeal at the municipal level. Allow municipalities to recover the true cost of producing records for redaction, regardless of whether the requester chooses to view or receive copies of the records. And create relief from vexatious requests. Consider applying the Public Records Act for requests from residents and businesses within the state of Vermont. Consider language in the Public Records Act that only requires information about financial transactions to be produced electronically, mailed, or allowed to be photographed 6 months after the transactions have been completed. So those contracts related to the records have been completed and paid for. And that's all I have for you. And thank you again for your time. Let me know if you have questions.
Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, I got it. So the contract piece is something I had heard sort of anecdotally from municipalities, road crews, things of that nature. So I just wanted to ask you if you had like a little bit more specificity with that, like what type of like contracts are being targeted. I heard it was about there was a website that was like housing information that was straight from public records. And then it was, I guess I'll use the word bid rigging on things like road salt, aggregate. And that is just one example.
Right. That is certainly an example. The example I'm referring to is something I don't want to share publicly, the full details of it, but we have taken steps to prevent it from happening. Having that information, public information on our website. But there are certainly that type of information that could be found in other municipalities. So I think there needs to be, in order to limit the risk to municipalities and to therefore their citizens, and taxpayers, I think there needs to be some sort of more control on that and who we are providing those records to.
Thank you. Rep. Waters Evans.
Yeah. Morning.
Good morning.
What role do you think a person's motivation and the results of what they do with that information after they get the request? Like, what role do you think that should play in their right to access this, which they currently have?
Right. I don't know that we can understand or question people's motivations. I think we just need to do as much as we can to safeguard information from getting in the hands of individuals that may not have good intentions for it, and just limit the risk to the towns and to their taxpayers.
I struggle with limiting,
Right.
because so I guess my next question for you is, do you have a threshold in mind or like an example of where do we cross the line from just asking the question to, or asking a bunch of questions to becoming vexatious?
Right.
And within that, let's say I am vexatious and I make a zillion public records requests and all of them seem frivolous and annoying, but one really gets to the heart of the matter that's really important to me. How do you see like someone's request being labeled as vexatious as, like, where is that line? And how do we pick and choose like what is worthy of responding to and what isn't?
Well, can I answer it in a way where when we have residents that have concerns and perhaps maybe they start that public records request, our first thing is going to be to call them, maybe invite them to come in, or maybe they have come to the counter. We're going to sit down with them and try to understand what their concerns are and answer those questions as we can and provide information. So we will do all of our due diligence and really take the time with residents that have any concerns. And so a lot of times we may go from that public record request to we've had a conversation and now they have developed understanding and they aren't concerned. They've now gotten the answers to their questions. So we are fully willing, and we do a lot of public information. We have our agendas are up around, and we have all of our information packets that are available to the public. We have those on our website. So we put out as much public information as we can. We also take the time. We have our staff are in person. We take the time when people come to our counters and calls. So that we will go above and beyond. The vexatious requests are very uncommon. I think the more the concern is, it is the staff time that's involved in that type of a request or any of the requests that we have. We don't have dedicated staff time, and I don't think there are municipalities that have positions dedicated just for receiving public records requests and acting on those. The concern is these businesses outside of Vermont that they are just looking for information to sell the information to other businesses. They're not the residents that are impacted by the services. And so we're looking for some sort of control to limit that, because that's where we're seeing a large volume and a growing volume of the staff time that's needed to account for those requests.
What kind of information would they be?
They're looking for all kinds of information. There are purchase orders, all the details, financial details of things. So that's a common one. They may be looking for bid information, lots of, all the details on that. So those are probably the most common, the largest volume that we're receiving. But a lot of them are related to financial information.
And do you see a way to be proactive and maybe release a lot of this information or have it available online? Like, if that's information that will eventually be released anyway through public records, like, would it be more cost effective and easier for staff to just throw it out there initially?
So that's the concern. And that's how we wound up in that attempted fraud, because it was available online. And so that's when we had to look at how we're doing things and limit the risk to our taxpayers. And so we took that information, and again, I don't want to share all the details of it, but we were able to do something different. Still have it available for in-person inspection, but not so readily accessible for folks to get all of that information, especially for active vendors and contracts. So
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Any questions from the members right now? So, you cited in your testimony that, your custodial duties are not relevant to the law enforcement of the town of Colchester. How does that work with your PD?
So they have some record staff that is part of their duty, but they also have other duties as well. So they go through all of the things that you heard from public safety. They're doing that within our local police department.
Hey, how many members do you have in your department?
How many members are the records staff? There's
No, total law enforcement.
total law enforcement. There's 31 sworn officer positions.
And so I would guess, because I remember having a conversation last biennium, perhaps in and around record storage and footage. I'm just asking this to refresh my own memory. It's that cost is on the town for that archiving, correct?
Yes.
And I think I'm riffing off of our earlier testimony here with those folks have to go through the process of the redaction, so the video itself for all those same standards practices, also like communicating with state's attorneys,
Yes.
attorneys, victims, the accused, all of these things.
Yes.
That is all internal practice for you.
And certainly if you have more specific questions, I can get information or bring someone else back.
Yeah. No, thank you. I just wanted to just ask that because I saw that notation in your testimony.
Yes.
Rep. Warren.
Thank you. This might be a question for Josh or the LCT. I'm wondering if there's been a conversation with municipalities about ways to combine efforts or consolidate expenses or something. So, because I know that the cost is prohibitive for a lot of smaller municipalities, but do you see a way that maybe they could work together or?
Josh Hamburg, BLCT, for public records request management, I'm not aware of a lot of discussions focused on those cost reductions. I think a lot of information is very specific. But certainly there's conversations around other aspects of municipal, local government.
Right.
Roads, so forth. I think that, the police department example, we don't see any Vermont communities really expanding their police departments or ones that don't have them looking to grow them. I think they understand that those costs are challenging and there is a bill on the Senate side just introduced to look at a regional policing model for the whole Windham County, that the whole Windham County Senate delegation has put forward that we're supporting to see if there is a way to support rural Vermont that can't afford their own police department to actually get police coverage. And, something like that would manage records could be a way to have better sharing of costs and professional people dedicated to do this work that would be more efficient than every single department doing that.
Can I add? Samantha Sheehan, also with VLCT. On public safety records, and we have someone far more expert to my right, but they have to maintain federal standards. And the security of the records in, I think, every case for a local agency, no matter how small, would be prohibitive of intermunicipal coordination for the storage and management of the records. Even the rooms are secure, where the public safety records are kept. And it's a profound duty, like, to maintain the security of those records when you are protecting the right to a defense of someone potentially charged with a crime, as well as the right to privacy of the victims of crime. And I think what our clerks and our town managers and our municipal officials that are appointed and elected, they are also governing very sensitive records, like employment. You know, I worked for the city of Burlington, there were 600 employees, each one had a physical that was attached to their employment records. That means the city maintains private healthcare information on 600 of their employees. You have contemplate for a second the volume of financial information that even the smallest town has an authority to protect for every single taxpayer who pays by check and has their bank account number and their routing number on their property tax bill. And then in the management of even non-financial records, so much of the information is proprietary. Like, there's no way that the Rochester town clerk knows what bids were not awarded in a RFP process by the town of Hancock, right? Like, it's proprietary, often even down to the municipal official who was tasked with making that decision or has generated the records. Like, only that particular town official knows if the material back and forth with a member of the select board was deliberative for the purpose of an agenda. Like, the records clerk cannot interpret that information even as a part of the same town government. So it's all really important to be done by the sort of correct official who has custody of the record. You don't want to be moving these types of files back and forth and intermunicipally and from one type of secure data system to another, because each time that happens, the records become more vulnerable. Also, we surveyed this question, even just for like deeds and land records, like, is that something that municipalities have an interest in coordinating on? And like, everyone said no, like, that responded to the survey. I can't remember the exact number, but it was extremely low. So unfortunately, this is not a place where there is like an efficiency to kind of be achieved, because the sort of proprietary and the technical expertise is so particular to the record that's being requested.
That was incredibly detailed, but like really, like, that was a lot, but clear. Thank you, is what I was trying to say. Representative Stone.
I just wanted to flag something that was just said about medical records being in these whatever files. That would be breaking federal law. That would be breaking HIPAA. So if that's being done, that opens a whole other can of worms. It should not be shared, period. That's breaking HIPAA. So I'm just throwing that out there. People are doing that, that's against federal law.
I don't know if that was enumerated in the voluminous exemptions that we were in council last year, but most of that was relevant to medical situations. If you recall, like, there's.
I'm just saying Burlington having people's medical records seems quite curious.
They don't hold the medical records. There's like many employers have a release of particular information in their employment that assists with their access to certain benefits attached to their employment. I'm not an HR official. They're not like holding the medical records of the provider, but there's medical information attached to their employment records that has been released on the consent. And same thing in injury, workers' comp. Like, if you have an injury and you're involved in the compensation that you're owed under your terms of employment, the employer would also have information released to that for the purpose of facilitating the employee benefit for workers' comp. So I'm talking like that level of record, not like my entire healthcare history from like my personal doctor. Yeah, he still seems curious. it's and it's private information that has to be protected. The employee has a right to that information remaining private.
Did I see a curious,
Employment information.
could you just identify yourself again for the record since you're not at the table? Yes.
Or Tracy Leibowitz, Public Safety, and I was just gonna mention that there are exempt, like the Public Records Act would not be allowing anyone to get at that information because it's exempt. Employment information is exempt.
But you were speaking to like the centralized warehousing concerns of a mishap, allowing somebody in
Right.
there where they could access it, but like in a nefarious way.
Right, so like,
Whereas it's not subject to the release because it does have an
Exactly.
exemption.
that's what
for
has to be
clarification.
reviewed,
Yes.
found, and stopped from being released under the exemption.
All right, that was dense and informative. Thank you, everyone. Any other questions from our guests from Colchester? Nope. Okay. Thank you so much for your time and your perspective. It's appreciated.
Thank you for your time.
And anything else from galleries and our guests at the moment? Nope. All right, well, I guess we'll call it a little bit ahead of schedule. And we have had some soft conversations trying to identify bills to work on and testimony to tee up for other activity. So I will take us offline and we will do that until the lunch hour.
Thank you.